This is the fourth and current generation of Gerber Maxwell toilet that's been made since circa 2014. However, it really didn't start gaining traction until circa 2016, and by 2018, it pretty much replaced the third generation. Now, you guys know I like to over-exaggerate a lot, like, oh, this is the worst toilet ever, or, oh, this is the beginning and the end of this. But I literally mean when I say this. This is the worst, if not the worst toilet Gerber has ever crapped out. And I don't mean that lightly. This is easily their worst toilet ever made. And today we'll be talking about why this toilet is a complete scam. The overall design of this toilet is painfully generic. Like, it's looked like this since the first generation, and I never liked it, and I still don't like it now. It just looks cheap. As you can see, the Trapway passages are also painfully generic as well. The Trapway opening is very similar to a second generation Gerber Avalanche toilet. It also has a fairly large siphon unit similar to the second generation Gerber Avalanche. I don't know why they decided to go with this design, but they did. Speaking about cheap, let's take a look at the tank parts, which look terrible. You got a cheap handle, which seems to be more of a replacement, as they typically have more of an older Aquastore style handle, or common seen on like Ultra Savoys from the 2000s, but I digress. The fill valve is a fluid master, and it looks flimsy to say the least. And then you got the flapper. This just screams trouble right there. And in fact, I've actually seen one get stuck open due to the poor chain. It's ridiculous, honestly. And let's have a look at a sample flush. Well, to give it the credit, it does stay longer open than I expected to, but it's still a terrible flapper. Let's have a look at a flush. That was a press and release flush, and it flushes exactly like a second gen Gerber Avalanche, if not worse than one. Now, I hated the flushes on a second gen Gerber Avalanche, and I hate this even more. Let's hold the handle down and see if anything has been improved. No, not really. No, my main problem with this exact toilet is the quality control. It is abysmal. Like, probably the worst I've seen on a modern toilet. Like, it's not even funny. Compare the crappy quality controls of other Gerber toilets, like the first generation Gerber Aquasaver or even the third generation Gerber Maxwell. And it doesn't even compare. This thing has so many problems it's not even funny. From struggling to get things down, and do not even get me started on Boren. It is abysmal as well. But we'll get to those later. One thing I gotta mention about this toilet is that the pulling factor absolutely sucks. Which isn't really shocking considering the press and release flush is that. I don't even know what to describe that flush. It was horrendous. But it's no shock that the pulling factor sucks on a press and release. On a slightly longer flush, it really isn't much better. It's still quite bad. You know what else sucks about this toilet? The performance. It is shockingly horrible. It is very easy to clog one of these on a press and release. On a hold handle down type flush, on the other hand, it may unclog it, but it doesn't access the fact that the performance is still horrible. It might be slightly improved on a hold handle down kind of flush, but besides that, the performance absolutely sucks on these. It is very easy to clog one of these, and it's not even funny. Now let's take a look at Boren's. You may notice the angled rim jets, which is a nice bonus, but it doesn't excuse the fact that the Boren's is absolutely awful on these. Granted, the second generation Gerber Avalanche has the same problems with some rim jet issues and quality control, but it's even worse on here. I've noticed that stains gather like crazy on the back rim, and I've even seen some cases where toilet paper sticks. Like 1.6 Kingston levels of terrible. Holding the handle down doesn't really help much either, as towards the end of the flush it just stops rinsing. So, the Boren sucks. And that is the worst Gerber toilet ever made, aka the 4th generation Gerber Maxwell toilet. This thing sucks, like, really sucks. This thing has such crappy quality control and such poor qualities about it. Why would you ever get this toilet? It is a complete ripoff, and Gerber should be ashamed of themselves for making this abysmal creation. But let's take a look at this toilet and put it into the grading scale. Let's grade this abomination. The overall design of this toilet looks so cheap. Granted, it's always looked like this since the third generation, but I've never liked it then and I don't like it now. I give it a 4. The tank parts are so terrible on this thing, it's not even funny. Like, legitimately, compare the parts to this compared to the second generation Gerber Avalanche I reviewed, and the difference is night and day. While the tank parts are not perfect on the second gen Avalanche, at least they somewhat function, outside of the flapper sucking of course. Now let's go back to the 4th generation Gerber Maxwell tank parts. The fill valve is cheap and flimsy, the handle is cheap and flimsy, and don't even get me started on the flapper. I don't know what in the world they were thinking about with this chain to hook up to the handle, but it sucks. I've already seen a few of these toilets already have tank part problems due to the terrible chain that the flapper has, getting stuck in several places and staying open. Like seriously, this is embarrassing. What were they thinking with these tank parts? They get a 2. I think a lot of people know that quality control nowadays is absolute crap on a lot of toilets. But this toilet says, quality control? What's quality control? That doesn't exist on this toilet. I can go over the main parts that quality control is terrible in. You know, the rim jets not functioning most of the time, the inconsistent flushes, the easy cloggability of this toilet, which we'll touch on later, and so much more. But the reason I'm giving it such a low score is that the design is inconsistent as heck. This design isn't always consistent most of the time. Sometimes you'll get a Maxwell that looks like a Glacier Bay or a ProFlow. Unfortunately, this has been a problem since the 3rd generation, but it is so much worse now. Not to mention the quality control is just in the dumps with this particular toilet. That's why I'm giving it a 1. The Trapway is simplistic, but it is so much worse than you're expecting. I'm giving this a thing of 4. So you know how much I hate the flush on the 2nd generation Gerber Avalanche? Well, this toilet says, let's do that, but so much worse. Seriously, what kind of flush is this? On a press and release, it's easily a 1, but extending the flush is not much better. It gets a 2. It is horrendous. The pulling factor unsurprisingly sucks. While this thing has a very long siphon sometimes, especially when you extend the flush, the pulling factor on the other hand sucks. On a press and release it's easily a 2, but on an extended flush, sometimes you'll see some stuff struggle to get down the trapway, which is embarrassing, oftentimes leaving stuff behind in shreds. Not as bad as you're probably thinking on extended flush because, well, it's an extended flush, but it scores a 4. You know, something I thought wouldn't be much of a problem would be performance. I mean, sure, this thing has some other horrendous qualities, but surely the performance couldn't be that bad, right? Right? Let me tell you something. The performance on these things absolutely suck. I've already put up with several of these for this review, and trust me, I ain't joking when I said that almost every single one I've put up with has almost clogged or has clogged on me. It is shockingly easy to clog these toilets, and you probably wouldn't think it would be that possible, right? But let me tell you something. It is very easy to clog one of these. It's honestly shocking how horrible the performance is. On a press and release flush, it easily scores a 2, but on an extended flush, it still only gets a 3. The performance sucks. And now we're going to talk about Boren's. The Boren sucks on this thing. Sure, it may look promising at first, especially since it has angled rim jets like the 2nd generation Gerber Avalanche, but combine that with terrible quality control and you'll probably find one that doesn't have functioning rim jets all that well. Sure, this particular one might be a better example of better Borens, but even then, the Boren still sucks. On a press and release, the Borens is a 2, while on the hold and handle down type flush, it still only gets a 3. Yeah, whether it's press and release or hold and handle down type flush, the survivability is very low on this toilet for both sections. I give it a 2. It's embarrassing, honestly. Let's talk about the overall value of this toilet. Let's see if it's worth buying today. You know, I've reviewed so many terrible toilets. This is probably the most shockingly worthless toilet I have ever reviewed. Sure, I mean, some of the qualities being terrible is not very shocking, but there's some other qualities that did shock me, unironically. Let me just tell you, there is nothing, and I repeat, nothing good about this toilet. The design is cheap, the quality control is in the dumps, and every functionality of this toilet, from the Borens to the performance, absolutely sucks. The fact that Gerber thought this was a good idea to release for over a decade now is shameful, honestly. And the fact that they're still selling this abomination is pathetic, honestly. Should you buy this toilet? Absolutely not. This thing is worthless and a complete scam. Therefore, the value is a 1 on a lower end score, while on the higher end score gets a 2. Now let's compare the final scores of the 4th generation Gerber Maxwell toilet. The lower end score gets a 20 out of 100, meanwhile the higher end score gets a 27 out of 100. I think a lot of people know that I like to over-exaggerate a lot, but trust me when I say that this is easily the worst Gerber toilet ever made. There is not one redeeming factor about this thing at all, and it is just worthless all things around. There's a lot of horrendous aspects that don't surprise me, but others that do. Trust me when I say this thing is absolutely worthless, and you should never buy this, or ever touch one of these with a 10-foot pole. Stay away from this model.